My daughter put the straitjacket on me while I was still begging her to look at me. The shirt scratched my wrists. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere in the hallway, a television was making noise. "Mom's completely crazy. Put her in isolation," she told the emergency room nurse, her voice level, like she was reading a prescription. "She thinks she's being spied on." She chased my son with a broom. The nurse looked at me, swung her pen, then at the woman I had raised. A soft click as the last buckle clicked shut. My own child had locked me in a mental institution. "I tripped over a toy," I said, trying to sound calm. I tried to defend myself, and the nurse's gaze softened, but my daughter leaned toward me, filling the space I had previously occupied. "You'll get fixed here, Mom. Don't worry," she said, like it was a gift, "just to keep you safe." "From what?" I asked. She didn't answer. She looked past me. "She was hiding money," she added. "She calls my babysitter late at night, paranoid. Forgot to turn off the oven." The nurse's pen began to grind faster. I could hear the machine counting my heartbeat as if this were all new to the body that had carried her. The orderlies ushered me into a chair. The straitjacket smelled of bleach and something old. The doctor introduced himself, kind eyes, careful questions. "Do you know where you are, Mrs. Hale?" I told him the address, the date, the name of the president. I told him my daughter's birthday and the song I sang the night she had colic, and I walked in circles around the kitchen until dawn. He wrote anyway. How could my own daughter decide I was angry because it suited her? When did worry become a signature, a set of keys, a way to push me out of my life and into a room with safety glass? They forgot one thing. I was not alone. The caregiver she had mentioned, Anita, the one who watered my ferns and refused to eat my dry buns, stood in the hallway, her eyes sharp, her phone in her hand. She had seen the bank statements, the messages my daughter thought she had deleted, the sudden interest in my house for the grandchildren. Anita knows my memory better than anyone because she listens, and I listen too. For months, I had scribbled notes in a lined notebook labeled prescriptions, dialed numbers from the library, asked quiet questions in a calm voice no one suspected. "Rest," the nurse said, loosening her belt just a little. "Your daughter just wants what's best." Best for whom? I inhaled bleach and determination and counted to 10. I would walk away. I would leave the truth in good hands. I would not be gentle. But to explain how I got into this chair and how I got out, I have to go back to the beginning. I didn't used to lock my bedroom door. It began with the missing ring, my mother's thin gold band with the tiny sapphire, the one I wore on Sundays, and took off to knead bread. I assumed I'd tucked it into the little blue dish and forgot. I turned the dish over, then the drawer, then the house. A week later, my granddaughter arrived for breakfast wearing it on her thumb like a toy. "Mom said you told me I could borrow it," she chirped, swinging her legs under the table. I didn't scold a child. I called my daughter that afternoon. "Hannah," I said, keeping my voice low, "I didn't give Lily the ring." "Oh, Mom," she laughed, a sound that used to be my favorite. "You did. Last Sunday, after church, you said she should have something pretty for her piano recital." "I wasn't at church last Sunday." A pause. "Well, you must have forgotten. She loves it. Let it go. Let it go." The phrase fell into me like a small stone. I wrote it down in the recipe book, between notes for poppy seed cake and dill pickles. I began to write a lot of things down, conversations, dates, tiny oddities that felt like ants under the skin. The medicine cabinet bottles were a fraction lighter after Hannah visited. The checkbook had fresh entries in a hand that could have been mine if I'd been writing in a moving car. The neighbor across the street mentioned seeing a real estate agent's car in my driveway while I was at the dentist. When my husband Charles died, the house went quiet in a way that rattled the plates. I made myself a schedule: breakfast, walk, read, call someone, volunteer at the library on Thursdays. The first year, Hannah was sweet as honey. She came every Saturday with Lily and a warm casserole. She moved the heavy boxes I asked her to move. She cried with me when I couldn't open Charles's closet. Then somewhere between spring and summer, she began to bring her husband Craig, and the casserole stopped being a gift. "We'll organize your papers," he said, tall and careful, with words like a man stepping around a sleeping dog. He didn't like my kitchen radio playing the oldies. He said it made it hard to think. Craig works in insurance, which means he says risk a lot. He began to use that word about me. "There's a risk with stairs at your age, Julia," he'd say, nodding at the steps I'd climbed for 40 years. He said it about the garden, the rug, the glass coffee table. He said it about letting me handle my own online bill pay. Too much risk. "Let me set up autopay," he said. "I'll streamline." My son, Mark, lives 2 states away. He visits on holidays and calls on Sundays, a good man with a life and a family that hums along like a machine. He heard the same stories softened with Hannah's patience. "She's so independent," she'd say on speakerphone, as if praising a toddler who insists on pouring her own milk. "It's wonderful, but we should prepare." "I just want her safe." Anita came into my life because of a fall that wasn't one. I stepped off the curb at the farmer's market, turned to answer someone, and twisted my ankle like the wrong step in a dance. The urgent care doctor suggested a little help at home while it healed. Hannah found Anita, a nursing student who needed hours and paid work. On her first day, Anita brought me a cactus in a mug that said I paused my show to be here. She had the good sense to be quiet. She had a laugh that arrived late after she decided I deserved it. "Your daughter wants me to wear a body cam," Anita told me on her second week as we sat with our tea. "Says it would keep you safe." "Does she think I'm going to stab you with a knitting needle?" Anita smiled and didn't answer. We developed a rhythm. She ordered groceries I forgot, double-checked the stove I turned off, watered the ferns before they drooped. She also noticed things. She noticed that the pill bottle had moved from the cabinet to the countertop on a day I never went near it. She noticed that Hannah began letting herself in with the key at hours that collided with my naps. She noticed that Craig's text to Hannah brightened her face in a way a husband shouldn't. "Do you want me here when she visits?" she asked once, low voice, eyes kind but alert. "Yes," I said, "but let's keep my recipes between us." The recipes were actually notes. I started the book because the counselor at the senior center, free classes on balance and fraud prevention, good coffee, and lopsided muffins, said that writing helps you remember what's true. "Keep a log," she suggested. It protects you if you ever need to show a pattern. I took that advice and added my own. I wrote what Hannah said and what she didn't. I taped receipts for things I didn't buy. I wrote down the name of the real estate agent on the card I found, tucked under my doormat. I copied the number from the elder law pamphlet at the library. I also made calls, softly, from the library, where the phones are old and the walls seem to prefer whispers. I spoke to an attorney named Kessler, who said we don't need to do anything yet. Just keep your records. I spoke to Dr. Morales, my primary care physician, who put it bluntly, "Your cognitive screenings have been normal, Julia. If anyone suggests otherwise, call me. Also, don't sign anything." I spoke to the bank manager, a steady woman whose hair looked like it was always in the wind. She told me what an unusual withdrawal looks like and assured me the staff would flag anything suspicious. "I'll add a note to your account," she said. "No phone authorizations, in person only, with ID. Do you have a trusted contact?" "Anita," I said without thinking. "But let's not put her name down yet." The night before the hospital, I slept badly. The house had that strange silence of a rolled-up rug. I'd made tea in the evening because Anita had a cold, and I used the honey that sits on the second shelf. I remember the stickiness on my finger, the way I licked it, the taste, ordinary and sweet. Later, when I woke at 3 to a headache and a tongue like cotton, I walked to the kitchen and saw the honey lid slightly askew and a ring of something clear and viscous around it. In the morning, I told myself it was nothing. I told myself the new neighbor's floodlight was what woke me. I told myself to stop seeing ghosts. Hannah arrived at 9 with a canvas bag and a tight smile. "I'm taking you to the new neurologist," she said brightly, "just to rule things out." I should have refused. Anita wasn't due until 10, but the words rule things out are a fine trap for a woman who won spelling bees. I got in the car. We didn't go to a neurologist. We went to a hospital I didn't know, a beige building with a separate entrance labeled behavioral health. By the time Anita arrived at my house and found my note, gone with Hannah back for lunch, I had been checked in, strapped, and told to rest. The ward was a lesson in sameness, same sheets, same cups, same soft voices saying, "Let's try again." A woman named Marla wandered the hall in paper slippers, repeating December no matter the hour. A young man with arms like antennae drew spirals on a napkin until his fingers smudged gray. I stayed quiet. I answered questions. I asked for the patient rights advocate. That is a phrase I learned at the senior center. It is a key. Once you say it, the nurse must give you a brochure, and the brochure has a number, and the number leads to a woman named Elise with a clipped voice made of armor. Elise visited my room that afternoon and looked at my wrists. "Who authorized the hold?" she asked. "My daughter." "What are the stated grounds?" "Paranoia and aggression. I tripped over a toy and she decided it was an attack." Elise looked at the chart. "You're oriented ×4. Your labs are clean. The doctor noted constricted affect and tearfulness. That describes every person who ends up here." She sat. "Do you want an independent evaluation?" "Yes." "I'll request one for the morning." She lowered her voice. "Do you have someone to call?" "Anita," I said. "And Kessler, the lawyer." Elise smiled. "Good. You'd be surprised how many people think they're alone when they aren't." That evening, visiting hour, Anita appeared with a scarf I'd knitted for a winter that hasn't come. Her eyes slid over me, taking inventory. Red marks, the too-flat pillow, the brochure on the table. She set the scarf on my lap and spoke with her eyes. I moved my hands under it and felt the lump of my phone and the hard spine of the recipe book. She had slipped them inside like contraband. I could have cried. I didn't. "Your daughter called me 10 times, she said aloud, just enough to carry so the nurse at the desk could hear. "She said you were escalating. She said you accused her of stealing your tea." "My tea stole itself," I said dryly, and Anita's laugh arrived the way it always did, one beat late, clean and bright. When the nurse drifted away, Anita leaned in. "I checked your pantry. The honey has a sticky ring of diphenhydramine. I can smell it. It's the night formula, blue bottle. You wouldn't have used that, not with your blood pressure meds." She paused. "I took pictures. I bagged the bottle in a Ziploc. I watched the doorbell camera. Hannah was at your house last night. Craig, too. They used the key. Why?" Anita's mouth tightened. "Maybe because the open house is Saturday." I closed my eyes. "They listed my home?" She nodded. "I found the listing. Your living room is staged like a hotel. There's a bowl of green apples where your cookbook should be. The caption says, 'Motivated seller must move quickly.'" "Motivated seller," I repeated, tasting the words like a bad fruit. "I called Kessler," Anita said. "He wants to come tomorrow. Elise said she could arrange for a notary and your doctor to call in. She's putting a hold on any changes to your status until the independent evaluation." She squeezed my hands where the canvas jacket had rubbed them raw. "I'm not leaving you." "Good," I said. "We're not done." I did not sleep much. I pictured my house under strange light, strangers touching my banister, breathing the air Charles and I breathed for decades. I pictured Hannah's face the way it looks when she wins a small argument, a purse of the mouth, the tiniest lift of the chin. I pictured Craig's careful hands on my checkbook, his brow furrowed in that practiced concern. I let the anger come. It was clean as a blade and steadier than coffee. In the morning, Dr. Patel, the independent evaluator, arrived with a pen. He clicked when he thought. He sat across from me and asked the questions everyone asks: the date, the season, where we are. Then he asked the things that matter: how I pay my bills, what I like to cook, who my friends are by name. He asked me to draw a clock. I drew it, and when he asked for 10 past 11, I drew that too. And then I drew my kitchen clock with the crack through the 4 that Charles taped. and we never replaced because it had become part of us. He looked at Elise. She's fine. What about tearfulness? Hannah said from the doorway. She had arrived without warning, face professional, holding a coffee she did not offer me. What about the times she calls me and doesn't remember she's called? Dr. Patel turned. If I were 71 and my daughter had put me in a psychiatric unit, I'd cry too. He closed his folder. I see no basis for continued hold. I'll write the discharge. Hannah's mouth opened. It did not speak. Craig texted her. Her sleeve lit up. Her wrist buzzed. I saw his name because she lifted her arm to brush a strand of hair, and the text flashed, Buyer wants early access. Weekend still good? By noon, Elise had the papers. By 2, I was out. Hannah wanted to drive me home. We should talk, she said, brittle smile. I know you're upset. You always get dramatic when you're tired. I have a ride, I said. Anita pulled up in my car, a thing that made Hannah's nostrils flare. Anita's eyes met mine in the mirror, steady and warm. Ready? She asked. More than, I said. We didn't go straight home. We went to Kessler's office, a strip mall suite that smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper, the kind of place where things get done without varnish. Kessler is 68, with the built-in patience of a man who has made a career out of paperwork and fire. He listened with his hands folded, not interrupting when my voice lifted and cracked. When I was finished, he leaned back and sighed. This is what we're going to do, he said. First, capacity letter from Dr. Morales, formal and immediate. Second, emergency injunction to stop any sale or transfer of your property. Third, freeze on your lines of credit and an alert to the bank. Fourth, a police report regarding potential medication tampering. Fifth, change the locks. He looked at Anita. You okay to stay with her for a few days? I'm staying until we're safe, she said. Kessler nodded. Good. Also, we'll need evidence. You mentioned a doorbell camera. Anita slid the phone across the desk. Time stamped. Night before she brought Julia to the hospital. They enter at 9:14 p.m., they leave at 9:27. I bagged the honey bottle and labeled it. I can drop it with the police. And the listing is live. Open house Saturday at noon. Kessler almost smiled. Let them keep their appointment. We changed the locks that afternoon. The locksmith, a man named Ron, with a mustache like a broom and the practical tenderness of a grandfather, whistled while he worked. You want a keypad? Well, he asked. Easier for you? You can change it yourself. Yes, I said, and I'll choose the code. Anita brewed coffee that tasted like resolve. We made a list at the kitchen table. I wrote it in a new section of the recipe book under a heading no one but us understood. Calls, letters, copies. We notified the real estate broker, leaving a message with my name and a sentence. Kessler dictated carefully. This is to inform you the owner withdraws consent to show, market, or sell the property. Any entry without the owner's presence or notarized consent will be considered trespass. Then we called the police. I told the detective what I suspected about the honey. I told him about the hold. I used the words elder abuse because they opened doors. He said they would send someone to pick up the bottle. They did. The officer was young and tried not to look at the photographs on the mantle. He took the Ziploc and the doorbell footage on a thumb drive and gave me a card. What if the test shows nothing? I asked after he left. Then we still have enough, Kessler said over the phone. We have the listing, the doorbell footage, the sudden psychiatric hold coinciding with a sale. We have the bank alerts the bank had called while I was being discharged. A woman with a careful voice explained that a cashier's check for $5,000 had been drawn on my account that morning. In person, she said, from a branch downtown. The teller remembered the woman because she was in a rush. She had your driver's license number on a piece of paper. Did she withdraw it? No, the woman said with quiet satisfaction. We've had a watch on your account. The teller asked a security question and the woman couldn't answer. She left, describe her, I asked, my voice doing a thing I didn't know it could do. Mid-30s, dark hair, tall, black coat. The teller thinks she had a tattoo of a leaf on her wrist. Hannah has a maple leaf on her wrist. She got it in college and hid it from me until she wore a sleeveless dress to a summer wedding. And forgot. I used to think it was pretty. On Saturday, Anita and I got up early. We baked cookies, not for hospitality, but for the smell. We put the recipe book on the counter. We set out the bills and the checkbook and the letters with post-it flags like a neat little museum. Then we took them all away and locked them in the bedroom safe, because I've been alive long enough to know that comfort and caution can be cousins. At 11:45, cars began to line the street. At 11:50, a woman in heels carried a sign up my walk and planted it in the lawn. Open house. She carried a clipboard and a smile I could feel from the kitchen. At 11:55, Craig's car rounded the corner and pulled into my driveway like it belonged there. He got out first, scanning, then Hannah, every line of her face arranged. At noon, the doorbell rang. I opened it. "Welcome," I said, stepping aside. Hannah blinked. Craig masked faster. "Mom," he said, as if he were startled and not furious, "we were just showing my home," I finished. "I know." The agent, tall, tidy, eyes quick, lifted her clipboard. "We have a consent form." "Do you?" I asked. "From the owner?" She glanced at Hannah. Hannah smiled the way you smile at a waiter you're trying to charm into ignoring that you didn't make a reservation. "Mom signed last week," she said. "She's been under a lot of stress, so I'm handling the details." "Did I sign before or after you put me in a hospital?" I asked conversationally. The agent's smile developed a crack. "Perhaps we should—" "Yes," I said, "we should." I stepped back and let the detective in. He shook my hand, nodding politely to the agent, acknowledging Craig with a brief, professional glance, and meeting Hannah's eyes the way a doctor meets a man who wants antibiotics he doesn't need. "Afternoon," he said. "Detective Rains, we'll be observing today, if that's all right." Craig's mouth tightened. "On what grounds?" Rains held up a paper. "Report of suspected elder abuse and attempted fraud, active investigation." Also a temporary injunction on the sale of the property. The owner filed it yesterday. He turned to the agent. "Ma'am, you were notified by voicemail. Consider yourself notified again." The agent's face did a quick calculation and settled on survival. "Of course," she said, turning to her clipboard. "We'll postpone." "You'll cancel," I said softly. Anita stood at my shoulder. Like a short wall, she had set the laptop on the counter, the screen ready. When the first looky-loos came up the walk, curious, and then uncomfortable when they saw a detective in the kitchen, Anita pressed play. The doorbell camera footage filled the screen. Hannah and Craig entering at 9:14 p.m., leaving at 9:27. Then a second clip, Hannah in my kitchen, hair in a messy knot, opening the honey, pouring something blue into it from a measuring cup, stirring with my spoon, wiping the rim with a paper towel, checking her phone, and leaving the towel under the sink. The agent put a hand to her mouth. Craig took a step forward, stopped when Rains didn't move. Hannah made a sound I had never heard from her, a small animal caught in a wire. "It's cough syrup," she blurted. "She had a cold." I didn't want to wake her to give her the dose. Rains didn't blink. "And you thought the best delivery method was to spike the honey she uses for tea?" "It was night formula," she said, just as Anita had said. "It would help her sleep." "You don't medicate someone without their consent," Rains said evenly. "Particularly not someone on other medications, which could interact. Particularly not someone whose house you are trying to sell." "It was for her own good," Hannah whispered. I waited for shame to bloom and carry me away. It didn't. It stood there like a carved thing. "Is that why you went to the bank?" I asked. "For my own good?" "What bank?" Craig said too quickly. Rains let the silence work. "The bank declined a cashier's check this week. Teller described you, Miss Hale. He didn't say Hannah's name with cruelty. He said it like a weather report you can't argue with. You had the account number, you did not have the answer to the security question." Hannah looked at me then, really looked, the way she used to when she ran cross-country, and I'd tie her hair into a ponytail so tight, it shone. I saw the child she had been and the stranger she'd become. "I was trying to move things before you wasted them," she said. And there it was, the hard core of it. "You give to everyone." You keep the heating on for the tenant in your grandmother's house when he's late with rent. You donate to every cause that sends a letter. You are not good with money. I glanced at Anita. She lifted her chin the tiniest bit. And you are? I asked. The sale price? You planned to pay off Craig's debt, didn't you? The credit cards, the signature loans, the second car you didn't need, and the short-term cash you took from Lily's college fund. Craig swore under his breath, then remembered himself. Rains raised an eyebrow at him in a way that said, "Not today." The agent had quietly removed the sign from my lawn. She stood in the doorway, her hair lifting in the breeze. "I'll email everyone," she murmured, to no one in particular. I'll go." She went. Hannah began to cry without tears. Craig touched her elbow. She pulled away like a child whose toy has been taken. "You don't understand," she said to me. "Since Dad died, everything is heavier. You left me alone with it." "I didn't leave you," I said. "I buried my husband. I kept the house turning. I asked for help when I needed it. I never asked you to carry more than your share. And when you started taking more than yours, I noticed." Rains cleared his throat. "Ms. Hale, Mr. Vance," he said, polite in that old-fashioned way men of a certain age are in kitchens they do not own. "I need you both to come with me to answer some questions. You're not under arrest at this moment, but I would advise cooperation." Hannah looked as if she'd been turned to glass. Craig squared his shoulders like a man who has been to this rodeo and bought the hat. "We'll call a lawyer," he said. "You should," Rains replied. He turned to me. "We'll keep you updated, ma'am." They left my kitchen without looking back. The door shut with a good final sound. Anita exhaled. I poured us coffee with hands that shook now that they were allowed. We sat at my table, and watched the steam rise. It did not end there, of course. Nothing ends at a single door. The tests on the honey came back showing a high concentration of diphenhydramine, enough to sedate a small person, too much for a woman on blood pressure medicine. The prosecutor did not call it poisoning. He called it reckless endangerment and unlawful administration of a drug, which is less dramatic and more useful. There were charges for attempted fraud, for filing false statements with the hospital, for trespass. There was a hearing about the property and an order Hannah was not to come within 100 yards without invitation. There was a stern letter from the real estate board to the agent, who should have known to check ownership, and then a quieter phone call from me saying that I did not blame her, that she works in a system where daughters tell a certain kind of story and no one thinks to ask the old woman if it is true. Kessler built things as if with brick. He had me sign a new, durable power of attorney naming Mark as the first contact and Anita as second. He set up a trust for the house, not to lock it away, but to make it harder to shove me out of it. He sat with me and Mark and explained in clear terms what would happen if I could no longer sign my name. "We plan while we can," he said. "It's how you stay free." Mark flew in, shame pinned to his chest like a medal he didn't want. He stood in the doorway the way he did when he was 5 and had broken a window. "Mom," he said, and his voice broke in two. "It wasn't you," I said. "But you believed her because it was easier?" He nodded. "I thought I was being practical." He took my hand. "I am so sorry." We didn't fix everything, with one apology, but he stayed a week. He changed the light bulbs I can't reach and scraped the moss off the back steps. He made me eggs in the morning and brought me the good salt without me asking. He went with me to the police to give a statement. He sat with me in mediation, where Hannah, bleached by the process, stared at the table and refused to speak. Craig was not there. He had his own appointments with a judge. The worst night came a month later when the phone rang at midnight and I knew, as you know, rain before a storm begins. It was Hannah. "They took my passport," she said flatly. "I didn't think it would go this far." "You told them I was crazy," I said. "You tried to sell my home beneath me." "Dad would have understood," she said. And I almost laughed because Charles would have done what I did. He would have looked at her and said, gently but with that quiet strength, "No." "You can get help," I said. "You can admit what you did and ask for the mercy I cannot give." She hung up without saying goodbye. I put the receiver back in its place and sat in the kitchen dark with the hum of the refrigerator and thought about babies and the ways they teach you to love someone who can't love you back yet. I thought about the slow break of whatever had cracked in Hannah over the years, resentment like a mildew that spreads behind the wallpaper until you take the wall down and see it was always there. I did not forgive her, but I recognized the shape of her hurt, and I marked it in my book like a recipe that doesn't work but tells you something important about salt. Anita began studying for her RN boards in the evenings at my table. She read aloud to me sometimes, and I quizzed her on dosage calculations because I like numbers and because it amused me to hold in my hands the symbols of the power someone once tried to deny me. We planted lettuce, we fixed the wobbly leg on the hall table, we returned the staged bowl of green apples to the agent with a note. Thank you, but no. One afternoon, I received a letter with official lettering from the hospital. It contained a copy of my intake assessment, a form with boxes and phrases. Under presenting problem, it said, brought in by daughter for safety concerns. Mother appears anxious. Reports being plotted against under initial plan, it said, observe, reassess, consider medication for agitation. There was a place for patient comments. It read, I am not a danger to myself. My daughter is a danger to my life as I know it. I framed that page and hung it near the phone, not as a trophy, as a reminder that I spoke, even when they had put their hands on me to quiet me, even when the room was full of gentle authority. I spoke, and then I got out, not with force, but with a path made of notes and a woman who watered my ferns. The court process took time. It always does. There were continuances and a parade of unnecessary adjectives. Hannah pled to a lesser charge on the medication count. The fraud charges stuck. She did not go to prison, but she did community service at a shelter where the beds are lined up like ships, and the women's eyes look like mine did in the hospital, that careful, diminished light. She sent me a letter. It was short. I kept it in the recipe book under desserts, because I am my mother's daughter and I keep the bitter with the sweet. Mom, the letter read, I wanted you to be safe. I wanted control because I felt out of control. I thought if I managed your life, mine would stop spinning. I am ashamed of what I did. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know I see it now. I didn't write back right away. I am not a priest. I am a woman whose wrists remember canvas. When I did respond, months later, I wrote exactly this. You cannot manage your fear by managing me. Get help. If you do, call me. If you don't, don't. A year after the open house that wasn't, Kessler came to my kitchen for coffee. He is less a lawyer now and more a person who happens to understand documents I do not want to understand. We sat with Anita, who had passed her boards and worn her new badge to show me. Nurse, it said, like a promise fulfilled. I'm going to sell the house, I told them. They both stared at me as if I had announced a wedding. On my terms, I added, laughing at their faces, even though this is not a funny story. To a family that makes noise. I'm moving to the cottage by the Lake Charles, and I never managed to finish. Mark will help me put in a ramp. Anita is going to pick the paint because she can see colors I can't. Anita's eyes filled, and she blinked hard to keep from spilling. We'll make it ours, she said. Mine, I corrected gently. But you can visit so much the neighbors think you live there. When the house sold, I stood in the doorway alone and thanked each room. It sounds foolish if you have not loved a place. In the back bedroom, I touched the windowsill where Hannah had scratched her name when she was 8. I did not rub it away. I left it for the family that came after me so their little girl might put her finger in the groove and feel the truth that a home holds everything, the good and the wrong, and the things that can still be made right. On my last night there, the sky bruised the way it does when storm and sunset quarrel. Anita slept on the sofa, curled like a cat, one arm thrown over her face. I walked the rooms with a cup of tea that tasted like lemon and work and relief. I stopped at the phone and looked at the framed intake page and the note I'd taped next to it the day after the open house. Remember what you know. It has become my prayer. It is not poetic, but it is serviceable. I don't pretend that revenge made me whole. It didn't. Justice is a thin blanket. It warms briefly and then slips off the edge when you turn. What I have is better. A life I chose, protected by the dull, necessary scaffolding of documents and locks and people who answers the phone at midnight. Hannah is still my daughter. Sometimes I hate that, and sometimes I am grateful. Both feelings are honest. Mark calls more. We are learning each other as if we have been living in different countries and finally share a language again. Anita eats my dry scones and does not complain. And on Sundays, we put the kettle on and count what we have instead of what was taken. How did I walk out of a locked ward and into my own kitchen with the people who tried to bury me standing like children in front of my refrigerator? I paid attention. I asked for help out loud. I wrote it all down. I left room in my bag for a scarf heavy enough to hide a phone and a book labeled recipes. I let a woman in blue scrubs be my ally, and I let an old lawyer build me a fortress out of paper. I learned that love and control are two different spices, and one of them will ruin the stew. So here's the truth, the kind you can put in a drawer and pull out when the next storm comes. You are allowed to defend your life. You don't have to be gentle with people who treat your beating heart like a key to a house they want to sell. You can be sad and firm. You can be fair and unforgiving. I was, and I still am. And if anyone tries to tell you otherwise, if they put a jacket on you or a story or a word you don't accept, you can look at them with steady eyes and say, in the small, ordinary voice that carries farther than shouting, "No, this is mine." The door to the cottage sticks in summer. The first time Mark came to visit, he shouldered it with a grunt and said, "Needs planing." He set the toolbox down with the precise thud of a man declaring himself useful. We fixed it together, me holding the wood and him shaving slivers until it sighed open and closed like a book. He made a pot of coffee that tasted like our old Sundays. He walked the little deck with me and leaned against the rail to watch the heron at the shoreline. "It suits you," he said, and I believed him. A week later, I got a postcard with a picture also of a red maple tree reflected in a lake. No signature, just a single line on the back, "I am trying." I pressed it flat and slid it behind the frame of the intake page. Maybe one day I will put it on the fridge. Maybe I won't. I don't owe anyone that decision but myself. On the first night that felt like fall, Anita brought over a casserole so heavy it announced itself. We ate at the small table, our knees bumping, talking about a patient who cried when the nurse brushed his hair because no one had touched him gently in years. After dinner, we washed the dishes with our sleeves rolled and no radio, the hum of the refrigerator, now a friendly sound. I dried the last cup and turned it over on the towel, and Anita said, without looking up, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I'd been late that day?" "Sometimes," I said. "And then I think about how I wasn't." She nodded. "You would have gotten out anyway." "I would have," I said, "but it would have taken longer." I hung the towel on the hook and looked at the door that opened cleanly now, at the world beyond it, ordinary and mine. Time is the only thing you never get back. That's why you guard it like a house. Anita smiled at that and reached for the light. We stood in the soft dark a moment, the kind that holds you without asking. Then I said goodnight, and she left, and I went to bed with the windows open because the air smelled like leaves and forgiveness I was not ready for yet, which is to say, it smelled like the truth. If you want the short version, here it is. My daughter called me crazy. The hospital called me a patient. I called a lawyer. My sitter called it what it was. We made a plan. We kept our own counsel. We did not shout. We brought the right people into the kitchen at the right time. And when the woman who buckled me in tried to buckle my life as well, I unfastened what I could and cut the rest with the sharp knife of a quiet, practiced no. People like to ask me if I regret anything. I do. I regret not noticing sooner the way Hannah's love curled around a want and became something else. I regret letting Craig into my kitchen without asking him to wipe his feet. I regret not having the locks changed the day after Charles's funeral, not because anyone meant harm then, but because grief makes you generous, and generosity makes you soft. But I do not regret keeping notes in a book that says recipes. I do not regret asking for a patient advocate or making eye contact with a doctor who sees the person in front of him instead of the label on the chart. I do not regret baking cookies on the day my house was supposed to become a showroom and letting the smell of butter and sugar testify that I am alive in this place now. You want a moral? Find a pastor. I have only this. If a woman like me, tired, freshly bruised by life, risks still remembering the bite of a strap, can pull her life back from the hands of people who think love is a lock, then so can you. And if your hands are shaking so hard you can't hold a pen to make the first note in your own book, call someone who will hold the page for you until you can. If you can't find that person, come to my porch. The door doesn't stick anymore. I'll open it. And we'll begin with the words that saved me, the ones I wrote in large letters at the top of a clean page the morning I got home from the hospital. Remember what you know.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.